Okay, so, sometimes you think about government agencies, right?
Hmm.
And you picture these like massive, slow-moving things, and then boom, everything changes. And that's exactly what we're going to look at today. A situation where one of those major agencies, the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, got completely like flipped on its head.
Yeah.
And it happened fast.
And the scope, too, like, whoa, the sheer speed and how much change, it's not something you see every day. I mean, to completely reshape a whole federal agency basically overnight, it tells you they were really trying to bypass all the usual, civil service rules and processes. They went straight to the top and just changed everything.
Exactly. And to really get into this, we've got this pretty wild document, a memo, an opinion from a judge, Judge Chuang in Maryland, dated March 18th, 2025. It's all about this legal fight over what went down at USAID.
And it really highlights this whole thing, what can happen when, you get these top-down changes super fast, especially in the government, where you have all these established procedures and, of course, laws. It all clashes. In this case, it really shows that clash.
Yeah. Okay, so backstory time. It all kicks off with an executive order, right? January 20th, 2025. And this order creates a new thing, the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE. And the person in charge, Elon Musk. And DOGE wasn't some small thing. It had real power over a bunch of federal departments and agencies, including USAID.
And that's the first question, right? How does something so new, led by someone, not from the government world, suddenly get so much power? That's a key part of this whole story.
So what we're doing today is we're going to break down the big events, the legal arguments, the whole impact on USAID, and we're going straight to Judge Chuang's opinion to figure out the timeline, the when and the why of this legal challenge.
Yeah, using the court's opinion, it's like we get this detailed, legally grounded view. No speculation, just the facts, the arguments the judges take.
So back to the beginning. The creation of DOGE, Musk's role. This wasn't like totally out of the blue. On November 12, 2024, President Trump, he announces that the great Elon Musk would be heading up DOGE, and the goal: to dismantle government bureaucracy, to completely shake up how federal agencies work.
And the words they use right from the start, dismantling, cutting down to size, it's clear they had a very specific and ambitious plan for DOGE. They wanted to change things big time.
Not just talk, either. There's an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal that lays out the plan, really pushing this idea of shrinking the government, making it smaller. Then, January 20th, 2025, Executive Order 14,158, that makes it official. DOGE is born. They also call it the United States DOGE Service, or USDS, and they put it right inside the Executive Office of the President, the stated goal: to bring federal tech and software into the modern age, all for efficiency's sake. And that location, inside the Executive Office of the President, super important. It gave DOGE tons of authority, direct access to the President.
Yeah, absolutely. And then who's running the show? February 11th, 2025, President Trump officially appoints Elon Musk to lead DOGE. Publicly, Trump's calling him a leader, saying DOGE has some very brilliant young people. He even says he signed the order creating DOGE and put Musk in charge. So right there, you see the president, full support, showing how much he valued DOGE and Musk.
And it gets even more direct. Like at a cabinet meeting, Trump calls DOGE one of the most important initiatives. And in a presidential address, March 4th, 2025, he points Musk out, who's in the audience, saying, "I created this brand new Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE. You might have heard of it. It's headed by Elon Musk, who's with us tonight." And then he tells Musk, straight up, get it done. And him repeating that, get it done, it really shows he wants results fast.
And it's not just general directions. Trump's saying DOGE is acting at my insistence, that Musk answers to me. DOGE is officially described as like a support function for the president, for the agencies, the departments. But a big part of that is making sure the president's orders, his executive orders, actually get done. So it's almost like DOGE is this enforcer for the president, which, makes you wonder about their relationship with those agencies, the people already in charge.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Musk's own posts on X, the social media platform, add this whole other layer. He's basically saying he can make DOGE act. Like he posts something, then the National Weather Service, their employee website, they take down their diversity, equity, and inclusion, the DEI stuff, and Musk references this as DOGE will fix it. So he's using social media to announce and direct what DOGE is doing. Pretty unusual, right? And it gives you insight into his thinking, his priorities.
He also mentions a DOGE team member who got fired for some racist posts, so he's clearly involved in personnel decisions. But then it gets a bit more concerning. February 7th, 2025, Musk posts CFPB RIP on X. A little while later, part of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau's website, the CFPB, it gets shut down, deleted, and the timing. Musk's post, then this happens. It definitely makes you think there's a connection, and it raises questions about how much influence DOGE has over other agencies.
And to make things more complicated, Joshua Fisher, the director of the White House Office of Administration, he gives a slightly different take on Musk's official role. He says in a statement that Musk is actually an employee of the White House office. His title is Senior Advisor to the President, and he's classified as a special government employee, which basically means you're working for the government temporarily on specific tasks. But Fisher says Musk is not an employee of the U.S. DOGE service or U.S. DOGE service temporary organization.
Yeah, and that difference, that's important legally. Because it goes straight to the Constitution, to the Appointments Clause, which we'll talk about more later. But that whole question, Musk's actual role, where his authority comes from, that's at the heart of this legal challenge.
Okay, so we've got the setup. DOGE is created, Musk's leading it, direct line to the president, and a clear goal: change things fast. So let's get into what DOGE actually did, specifically at USAID. The court opinion, it describes a bunch of things happening really fast, starting around January 20th, 2025. DOGE teams, and these teams include people who worked for Musk's companies before, they arrive at the Office of Personnel Management, OPM. And they basically take over the OPM director's area. So already you've got people from Musk's world coming into the government. Another thing that's not typical, and it raises questions about, conflicts of interest.
And it doesn't stop there. DOGE reportedly locks senior career civil servants out of OPM computer systems with really important data about federal employees. Then, January 23rd, 2025, OPM announces this new way to communicate with all federal employees, which fits with DOGE's focus on technology. The very next day, DOGE announces on X that in just 80 hours, they've canceled about $420 million in contracts and 2 government leases, and they're focusing on those DEI contracts in empty buildings. So right away, they're cutting costs, changing priorities, very fast, very decisive. And one key thing here is they completely skip the usual processes for, dealing with government contracts. It shows they wanted to be in control right from the start.
And then, around January 27th, 2025, these DOGE teams, they start working at a bunch of federal agencies, including USAID. The court opinion says they did a ton of stuff, and it doesn't seem like they got approval from the people running those agencies. They're making decisions about grants, contracts, canceling things, changing policies, all on their own.
Right.
So you have this lack of talking to the agency leaders, showing how much power DOGE had, basically going around the usual way things work.
Yeah, there are even reports that people appointed by the president to these agencies, they were totally surprised when, on February 7th, 2025, DOGE cut billions of dollars from the National Institutes of Health, money that was going to universities and research. Talk about a huge, unexpected move. And changes this big, especially with money, without much coordination, it can have a domino effect, impacts research and development, all kinds of stuff.
And it wasn't just about money. DOGE teams apparently fired people from the Department of Agriculture, USDA, and the Department of Energy, specifically the National Nuclear Security Administration, the NNSA. And in some cases, the USDA and NNSA had to rehire these people because they were like essential personnel, people dealing with things like bird flu, nuclear weapons. That's really serious. It shows the risks of acting too fast, maybe without really understanding the situation and making, personnel decisions that have huge consequences.
And to make things even worse, Musk reportedly admits at a cabinet meeting that USA accidentally canceled funding for Ebola prevention. That's a really scary mistake with potentially devastating effects on global health security. It shows what can happen when changes are made too fast without really thinking about the consequences, without understanding how the existing programs work.
There's also this statement from a former chief financial officer of FEMA, mentioned in the opinion. He says that there was this sudden policy change at FEMA about sending resources to states and local governments. And at the same time, Musk announces this change on X. So it seems like the decision wasn't made by FEMA, but by Musk or DOGE. Just adds to this picture of DOGE under Musk, calling the shots in these agencies, going around the usual leadership.
And then February 20th, 2025, DOGE puts a $1 spending limit on all government credit cards at GSA, OPM, CFPB, and USAID. Can you imagine the chaos that would cause for their day-to-day work? This blanket limit, without considering, what each agency needs to function, could seriously hurt their ability to do their jobs.
And finally, this one's almost hard to believe. February 22nd, 2025, Musk posts on X telling federal employees to get more aggressive in understanding what got done the previous week. And he implies that if you don't reply to an email, it means you quit. Thankfully, the Office of Personnel Management steps in, tells agencies they don't have to do that, and they tell employees to ignore it. But that post, it's a prime example of these unusual, some would say totally inappropriate, methods they were using to force change in the government super fast.
So we've seen what DOGE was doing across different agencies. Now let's zoom in on USAID, the specifics. Seems like USAID got hit hard and early. Same day DOGE is created, January 20th, 2025, President Trump also signs another executive order, 14,169. This one's called Reevaluating and Realigning United States Foreign Aid. It basically puts a 90-day pause on any new commitments or spending of foreign aid money. There are reasons. To make programs more efficient and make sure they fit with U.S. foreign policy. And this order about foreign aid, it kind of sets the stage for what's coming next for USAID.
Building on that, January 24th, 2025, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, he sends out a directive, the court calls it the Rubio Order, to all the embassies and consulates. And this directive follows the Foreign Aid Executive Order, saying to pause any new spending until they do a review. So you got these two directives, one from the president, one from the Secretary of State, and they're signaling that they're going to take a closer look at how foreign aid money is being spent.
But then DOGE steps in and things really escalate. The court opinion says that DOGE people got access to the U.S. Department of the Treasury's payment systems, and they actually froze USAID's payments. And this is despite warnings from the acting Secretary of the Treasury, who was worried about the legality of stopping authorized payments that an agency has already certified. This is a big deal. DOGE messing with Treasury systems, seemingly ignoring legal concerns from Treasury officials. That's a big power move.
Right around January 27th, 2025, the DOGE teams show up at USAID headquarters in Washington, D.C., and they're not just observing. They get access to the financial systems, the personnel systems. They reportedly put senior USAID officials on paid leave, saying they didn't follow the Rubio Order. And all of a sudden, USAID contracts and management practices are no longer in the national interest. The speed at which they sidelined experienced people and dismissed how USAID was being run, it really suggests a takeover.
And it gets even more intrusive. They got the highest level of access to every single USAID email account. They could send emails, delete emails, everything. That's a major breach of trust, and it raises serious security questions. Imagine someone having access to all the emails in an entire agency. It makes you worry about data privacy, security, and the potential for someone to misuse or change sensitive information.
On January 30th, 2025, people from the White House apparently tell some USAID grantees that their overseas staff got paid through the HHS payment system, but the usual way of paying grants was blocked. And to make things worse, DOGE team members reportedly demanded that no senior USAID manager could authorize payments, that only they, the DOGE team, could approve money. This kind of control over payments, it could cripple USAID, make it impossible to provide aid, support their programs around the world.
And the leadership at USAID. They were being taken apart fast. Jason Gray removed from his position. Secretary Rubio takes over his duties. Peter Morocco, the State Department's Director of Foreign Assistance, his role expands too. But Morocco says something interesting in a statement. He says he consults with the DOGE team on things like personnel, and they have ultimate authority. But then he also says, the DOGE team cannot legally direct me to do anything regarding personnel, funding, or the like. So it hints at the legal mess surrounding DOGE and maybe some internal pushback against their authority.
The changes at USAID, they were physical too. Very symbolic. On Friday, January 31st, 2025, they removed those plaques with the USAID seal from the agency's offices. The very next day, Saturday, February 1st, the entire USAID website goes down. And they put another 57 USAID employees on leave. It really felt like they were trying to erase USAID's identity, its public image.
It's like they were making a statement, taking away their name, shutting down their website, telling the world that USAID, as it was over. And that same evening, February 1st, things escalate in a potentially really sensitive area. DOGE team members want access to USAID's secure data systems, the restricted areas. They demand security clearances to get in. But when USAID's security people, John Voorhees and Brian McGill, they try to block access to this classified stuff, Musk himself and a senior DOGE official, they step in. Musk keeps demanding access, even threatens to call the U.S. Marshals if he doesn't get his way. And what happens? They suspend dozens of USA officials, and Voorhees and McGill both put on leave for trying to block access. And a USAID cybersecurity person even reports seeing EOGE team members who don't have security clearances using admin rights to get into those secure areas, places that require clearances. A DOGE official later says on X that no classified material was accessed without proper clearances. But despite that, all the USA computer systems are dismantled. It's a huge disruption, potentially really damaging to the agency's systems and security.
By Sunday, February 2nd, 2025, they've deactivated 2,000 email accounts belonging to USAID people. Matt Hobson, who President Trump just appointed as USAID's chief of staff, he resigns. They decide to terminate the contracts of 800 personal service contractors. It's like this mass exodus, some voluntary, some forced, happening super fast at the agency.
And on that same day, February 2nd, Musk posts on X, calls USAID evil and a criminal organization. He even says, time for it to die. And President Trump, talking to reporters, he says pretty much the same thing. USAIDs have been run by a bunch of radical lunatics, and we're getting them out, and then we'll make a decision. These are strong, damaging statements coming from the people in charge of all this.
Then, something really remarkable happens. On Monday, March 3rd, 2025, Musk does a live broadcast on X. He says he talked to President Trump a few times, and Trump told him to shut down USAID in detail. Musk says USAID was incredibly politically partisan, that it supported, quote, radically left causes throughout the world, including things that are anti-American. Then he uses this wild comparison.
Yeah.
He says that looking into USAID was like finding not an apple with a worm, but a ball of worms. There is no apple. And when there is no apple, you've just got to basically get rid of the whole thing. That is why it's got to go. It's beyond repair. That's a pretty clear statement about the agency's future, or lack of one.
Earlier that same day, February 2nd, a DOGE team member sends an email from a USAID account telling all the staff that the headquarters would be closed on Monday, February 3rd. Musk even posts on X, "We spent the weekend feeding USAID to the wood chipper. Could have gone to some great parties, did that instead." The tone of those messages is really striking, right? Like, no respect for the agency, for the people who work there.
Monday, February 3rd, they put another 606 USAID employees on leave. But that same day, Secretary Rubio sends a letter to Congress. He says the Trump administration wants to talk to you about how foreign aid is being handled around the world, and that he told Peter Morocco to start reviewing and potentially reorganizing USAID. The letter mentions stuff like maybe suspending or ending programs, closing missions overseas, reducing the workforce, even privatizing things. It also says the State Department will be talking to Congress about possibly taking over some parts of USAID, and that what's left of USAID might be abolished. But he adds, it will all be done consistent with applicable law. So it seems like they're acknowledging, maybe a little late considering what's already happened, that they need to involve Congress in these changes to USAID. And that part about applicable law, that's important too.
The next day, Tuesday, February 4th, they hit USAID with another massive round of administrative leave. 1,416 more employees are told to stay home. Basically, the agency's ability to function, it's gone.
Then, Friday, February 7th, Musk announces on X that the USAID headquarters is now being used by U.S. Customs and Border Protection, CBP. He even posts a picture, the sign above the entrance, U.S. Agency for International Development, it's gone. And the caption, unburdened by what has been. USAID staff and contractors who weren't allowed in before, they're told to come get their stuff. By that evening, they've identified another 2,144 USAID employees to put on leave at 11:59 p.m. that night, which means out of USAID's 4,765 employees, 4,244 would be on leave, almost 90% of the whole agency. They basically cleared out USA, replaced them with CBP.
Of course, all of this leads to legal action. The American Foreign Service AFSA, they sue Trump in D.C., and they get a temporary restraining order, a TRO. This TRO says they have to bring back the USAID employees they put on leave, and they can't put any more people on leave or force anyone overseas to come back. When this TRO is issued, 2,140 employees are already on leave. Peter Morocco says 98% of them were in the U.S. So this AFSA TRO, it's the first legal pushback against what's happening at USAID. They're trying to protect the agency's employees.
They extend this AFSA TRO until February 21st, 2025. There are also two other cases in D.C. that get TROs too. These TROs say the State Department, USAID, and other agencies can enforce old orders or make new ones that stop them from spending foreign aid money. So it seems like the courts are starting to limit what the administration can do with USAID and foreign aid.
But then, February 19th, 2025, 2 days before that AFSA TRO is set to expire, President Trump, he's at this big summit, the Future Investment Initiative Priority Summit, and he says, over the past month, we have effectively eliminated the U.S. Agency for International Development. Then on February 21st, the court does dissolve the FSA TRO, and they say no to a preliminary injunction because the plaintiffs didn't show they would suffer irreparable harm. So it seems like a setback for those trying to stop the changes to USAA.
But it's not over yet. On Sunday, February 23rd, 2025, a DOGE team member creates this new email account, HR Announcements, at usaid.gov. That same day, around 3:42 p.m., employees, including one of the plaintiffs in this case, they get an email from USAIDfo at subscribe.usaid.gov. It says that by 11:59 that night, all USAID direct hire personnel, except for people doing essential functions, core leadership, or special programs, will be put on leave. And the email also says they're starting a reduction in force, a RF, that will affect about 2,000 USAID people in the U.S. And right after that email, this plaintiff, they get a RIF notice from that new announcements at usaid.gov account.
In this RIF notice, it tells the employee they're being separated from the federal service on April 24th, 2025. They try to contact USAID employee and labor relations, like the notice says, but they just get an automated reply. It says the office only has a skeleton staff and can't respond to everyone, that they can't give information about your individual status right now. And to make things even crazier, later they get another email saying that the office didn't even send the RIF notices. It's chaos.
And the court opinion, it talks about the impact of all of this on the people involved, the plaintiffs in this case. A bunch of them say they lost access to all the USAID systems, including the payment systems. Some got access back because of the Avis A2RO, but then they lost it again. Some were put on leave, some were fired, some had their contracts ended. It all came down to what DOGE was doing at USAN.
Around February 2nd, 2025, a lot of the plaintiffs say they can't get into USAID systems anymore. Big problem, because they need those systems to get reimbursed for work expenses, to access their salaries, to, live. Some get back in thanks to AFSA TRO, but then it's cut off again. And for people stationed overseas, it was even worse. They lost access, sometimes still don't have access, to the systems they need for basic needs, and in some cases, for their safety and security. Especially in high-risk places, imagine suddenly losing access to your money or security systems. It's a really vulnerable position.
The court opinion mentions one person, J. Doe 22, working in a high-risk area in Central America. They put them on leave, and because USAID's payment system shut down, they can't pay their phone and internet bills. That directly affects their safety, their security in a dangerous place. And another plaintiff, a contractor working with their family in the Middle East, also high risk, they lost access to a vital security app. This app, it's what U.S. government people use to report dangerous situations, to get help in emergencies. So these individual stories, they show the very real dangers and hardships USAID people faced because of all these changes.
The court also says that a lot of the plaintiffs were really stressed emotionally because of this whole situation. They're worried about their jobs, about how to support their families. It's understandable, right? And they're concerned that their personal information, their PII, might be made public because DOGE had access to all that USAID data. And they're also worried about their reputations because Musk was publicly saying all these negative things about USAID.
So with all this going on, these USAID employees and contractors, they decide to fight back legally. They want a preliminary injunction from the court. They ask for narrow emergency relief to help those in immediate need and for broader relief to stop the defendants from doing anything that violates the Appointments Clause and this separation of powers. This legal challenge, it goes straight to the heart of the matter, the constitutional questions raised by DOGE and Elon Musk's actions.
The court, they have to consider a few things to decide on this injunction. Do the plaintiffs have a good chance of winning their case? Will they suffer irreparable harm if they don't get this relief? Do the hardships weigh more in their favor? And is an injunction in the public interest? So let's start with the most important thing. Do they have a strong legal argument? This means looking at their Appointments Clause and separation of powers claims.
The Appointments Clause argument is about Elon Musk acting like a high-level government official without being properly appointed. The Constitution says the president nominates, the Senate confirms. The court had to figure out if Musk's role was a continuing position with significant authority based on U.S. law. So they looked to his title, Senior Advisor to the President, his role in running DOGE, especially at USAI, and if his position was established by law. And for that last part, they point out that the USDS administrator position, which it seems like Musk was doing, was created by executive order, not by Congress. And that difference is super important when it comes to the Appointments Clause.
And the court finds that, the plaintiffs have a strong argument about the Appointments Clause being violated. They say Musk seems to be exercising too much authority as the USDS administrator without being appointed correctly. It's like they're saying he was acting more like a top government official than just an advisor, which means he needed to be appointed properly according to the Constitution.
The other big legal argument is about the separation of powers. The plaintiffs say the defendants overstepped their bounds. They messed with Congress's power to create and get rid of agencies and to control how money is spent. So the court looks at what laws Congress has made about USAI, how it's structured, what it's supposed to do, and the rules about reorganizing or changing its mission which often need Congress's approval.
And the judge agrees with the plaintiffs on this point, too. He says it looks like the executive branch, with DOGE and Musk, they were trying to dismantle USAI without Congress's okay. And by freezing and redirecting funds for USAI, they messed with Congress's power over government spending. Basically, the court is worried that the executive branch is going too far, doing things they don't have the power to do.
Next up, irreparable harm. The plaintiffs say they've been hurt and will continue to be hurt if the court doesn't step in. They talk about losing income, benefits, access to systems they need for work and even just to live, and damage to their reputations. The court acknowledges that, yeah, losing your job and benefits is a big deal, but they say that's something that can be fixed with money later on if they win the case.
Yeah.
So it's not irreparable legally.
But there are other things the plaintiffs mention that the court does consider irreparable. Things like their personal information being leaked, their careers being messed up, their reputations being harmed because of what happened to USA and all the negative stuff being said about it. And maybe, most importantly, USAID employees in dangerous places overseas, they can't access security and emergency systems because of all the disruption.
So when balancing the potential harm to both sides, the judge decides that the plaintiffs are more likely to be harmed if the injunction is denied. He says that a lot of USAID employees could be hurt, and the agency's mission, all that important foreign aid work, could be disrupted. So basically, he says that protecting the plaintiffs and making sure USAID can still function is more important than letting the defendants keep doing what they're doing.
And last but not least, the court looks at the public interest. The judge says that upholding the Constitution, making sure government officials are appointed properly, and keeping the different branches of government from overstepping their bounds, those are all in the public interest. And he also says that protecting government employees and making sure important foreign aid work can continue, those are also in the public interest.
So taking all of this into account, Judge Chuang makes his ruling on the injunction. He grants part of it, denies part of it. He says the defendants can't issue any more furloughing, suspending, or stop work orders related to USAID. That means no more people losing their jobs, no more disruptions to their work, at least for now, while the case is going on.
And this is a big one. The judge also says the defendants can't do anything else related to USAID unless and until Defendant Musk is properly appointed in connection with USAID. That goes straight to the Appointments Clause issue. Musk's role, his authority over USAID, it needs to be sorted out legally before they can do anything else.
And finally, he says they can't do anything at USAID that goes beyond DOGE's stated mission, which is modernizing technology and software, and even that is only allowed if Musk is properly appointed. So it's like they're trying to keep DOGE focused on what they were originally supposed to do, the tech stuff, and nothing more.
And the judge makes it clear that this injunction is just a temporary fix. It's to keep things as they are until they have a full trial and make a final decision.
So long story short, what happened at USI with Musk and DOGE, it was a whirlwind of change, and it ended up in court. The judge found that the plaintiffs had a strong case, constitutionally speaking, about the Appointments Clause and the separation of powers. So he issued this injunction, a partial one, to stop any more disruptions until Musk's role is legally clarified. And he's also limited what DOGE can do at USAID, making sure they stick to their original mission of modernizing tech.
And this whole thing, it really shows what can happen when you try to change the government too quickly without following the rules, the laws, the Constitution. There are consequences. And it raises some really important questions about how to reform the government responsibly.
Absolutely. It's a huge deal that DOGE and Elon Musk, coming from outside the government, were able to exert so much control over USAID, a major agency. And the fact that the court had to step in to make sure things were done constitutionally, it shows how important these legal principles are, even when there's pressure to make big changes fast.
So after digging into all of this, it leaves you with something to think about. What does this situation mean for the balance of power between the president and Congress? And how might this case affect how the government is reformed in the future? What about the role of people like Elon Musk coming from the private sector and their influence on public institutions? It's definitely a complex situation with a lot of potential implications for the future.